So, Mike, tell us about the symptoms that you've had, the problems that you've been having, and give us some idea as well of as the time frame.
So last November, I started to experience an uncomfortable twinge, lower back, left side. Usually when I was lying down in bed, I was staying away. I was sleeping in a really soft bed and I'm not keen on soft beds. And I just had this sort of twinge, which over the following sort of 10 days to 2 weeks, it just started to get worse and more than a twinge, and it genuinely started to become incapacitating. Actually, I was struggling to walk. I was struggling to lie down, and it just got worse and worse. I had to take my car to a garage, which is usually 10 minutes walk away. It took me 45 minutes to walk back, and there was lots of stopping and leaning against trees and things on the way back.
And did you have any numbness or tingling?
No, there was no numbness or tingling. It was just this very, very sharp stabbing pain, always in the same place, that absolutely took my breath away.
And did
And
you
I
feel
couldn't lie
that?
down. I couldn't stand. I could stand up, but I had to keep monitoring how I stood. I've done lots of work with you in the past, and utilizing techniques you taught me about pelvic positioning and things. And I could find a place where it didn't hurt, but the moment I moved or stepped sideways or turned or twisted, it would be back to.
And this was in the buttock more or the back?
Lower back, if you imagine where the belt goes,
Yeah.
and you've got the belt loop sort of just below left shoulder blade. So it's about there, right where the belt would go. If you drew a line from the shoulder blade down to the belt, it's where the two meet.
What would be really helpful is to get an idea of how you tried to manage that.
I was I was I was just trying to keep moving because I know sitting still is the worst thing. Obviously went to see my GP, who unfortunately basically just said go and take ibuprofen, it'll be all right. Um, but it wasn't all right. It just continuously kept getting worse. I did go and see a brilliant sports injury therapist who I know. He manipulated and worked and prodded and poked and certainly provided relief, but it was short term. It didn't last. And he said, it's a soft tissue musculoskeletal thing, but without actually having a scan, I don't know what it is because it isn't going away.
And what were your next steps?
Well, I kept taking the blimmin' painkillers. I had this trip to Iceland coming up, which was work related, and I knew it was going to involve a lot of work, walking and moving and climbing over rocks and icy things, and I was very worried about that. So I just started forcing myself to walk. And to begin with, it was difficult. I mean, genuinely, at the height of the pain, I suppose it was about 50 paces was about all I could manage before it became unbearable. But over the space of a couple of months of, again, monitoring back and pelvic stuff and walking, I found I managed to get it up to about 3 miles. I wasn't going to win any awards for speed or agility, but I figured it'll be okay. I can do it. Well, as you know, because I asked you for advice, and I don't know if you'd like me to mention what your advice was.
Yeah, go on then.
Your advice was, so to anyone listening, I was kind of hoping that I'd get maybe some sort of a treatment or something because I was using the Buttafly technique as well, which was helping. But and actually, what you said was, "What are you doing in your life right now? What's going on for you? This probably goes deeper." And your advice to me, actually, after a longish conversation about where I am with work, business, work-life balances, things like that, you said, don't go to Iceland, you're just doing more of the same. Yeah, for me, that was kind of difficult because that's the whole, yes, but people are coming to meet me and I've charged them money and okay, I've got a partner, luckily, who works out there, but I can't just leave him in the lurch on his own and all those stories. Yeah, so I went to Iceland.
And then what happened?
Yeah. Um, well, it wasn't actually in Iceland, but the curious thing for me was I stayed at an airport hotel And I had learnt that by making a fist and placing it in the right place, and by wriggling around when I laid down to go to sleep, because at one point, I could kind of manipulate that. I could feel something move, and then it would, and it's let go, and I could sleep. I lay down on the bed in the hotel the night before the flight, 'cause it was something like a 5 a.m. check-in or something. And it just bit me. It just bit me like never before. I literally was like screaming. I just had to get up off the bed, and it wouldn't let go. I sort of dozed off and on. There's no way I could lay on that bed. I tried several times, even after getting it to let go through my sort of manipulation thing. Lots of painkillers, ibuprofen. I spent the night I put the duvet on the floor, and I managed to lie on the floor of the hotel, and flew to Iceland the next day. But it just got worse over the following sort of 12, 24 hours. It was getting worse and worse, and I'm panicking because I'm meeting clients that night. And I figured it would be okay, but it really was bad. It was almost back, and it wasn't quite 50 paces, but there's no way I could have walked 3 miles, and I knew I was going to start being a liability. And that night I ended up going to the hospital in Reykjavik because I couldn't lie down. I really couldn't lie down.
And how were you feeling at that time with all of that going on? How were you feeling?
Lots of feelings. There was feelings of guilt for leaving my business partner in the lurch, although my clients were extremely understanding, and we hired someone else to help Thor with what we were doing. I felt guilty, very guilty, for leaving them in the lurch. There was like money worries attached to it, because obviously I can't get the income that I would be normally, because I was spending money on someone else to help him. But also there's a level of fear about what is going on here, because this began in November, and at this point in time it's January. And it's just got mega worse, and I was really struggling with my existing GP to get any resolution. But also there are things to do with my work, my business, that I know have been making me stressed and kind of miserable for a long time. And I was thinking back to actually what you'd said about it's more of the same thing, don't go to Iceland. And you were right. Which to me was a little bit of it's spooky, but also I know things go in two directions, physical affects mental, and mental affects physical. But somewhere down the line, after Christmas and after Iceland, so I'm not doing this anymore. I don't know what I want to do, where to go with this, but this isn't it, because all things to do with business and work, stuff which used to be exciting isn't exciting anymore, and it doesn't work the way it used to, and the world has changed, and it's time to move on. I ended up buying I like motorbikes, so I bought an old broken motorbike, and I spent most of the winter 3-4 days a week in my shed fiddling about with this old motorbike, which at the time I thought of as I've spent too much money on this and this is crazy. With hindsight, as a motorcycle I spent too much money, but it was a brilliant investment, because instead of sitting in a chair worrying and wondering I should be working and feeling guilty and what am I going to do, and it's all very well sitting here, and it took my mind out of that worry space and gave me something to concentrate on. But it also kept me moving. Even though it hurt, there was pain, but I kept moving. It took my mind off the worrying and the working, and that improved things, no question. But it's probably more recently, in the last 2 weeks, where I've really just gone, you know what, I really am not gonna keep doing this.
To highlight that really it didn't matter what you were doing physically, there wasn't any improvement. When we do a physiotherapy assessment, we're always looking for that cause and effect. Well, if you move like this, is it painful? If you sit down, is it painful? If you sit down for more than an hour, is it painful? So we're really looking for the cause and effect. And by everything that you're saying here, it seems very evident that there was no obvious cause and effect, and that actually, when you stopped working, doing your normal day job, and you were able to spend time in the garage and tinkering about on a old motorbike, which is something that you love doing, that actually something changed for you in that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I forgot to say, because my newer GPs, they referred me for MRI scans, and of course it takes time. And when I saw the specialist to get the scans interpreted, I'm expecting, okay, well, this and this and this, you need to do this, that, and the other, and off you go. But they said we can't really see anything particularly wrong. They said there was a slight narrowing of a gap between two vertebrae, which may have been rubbing something and causing a nervous reaction, but that was about it. And then, so that was only 2 weeks before I suddenly found hang on, I'm not taking the naproxen, I'm not taking the anti-inflammatory, and it isn't driving me nuts, it's not hurting. So yes, and I hadn't thought of what you just said about fiddling around with the motorbike. I'm still doing things and moving, so nothing much had changed, and yet I was achieving a degree of relief.
Yeah. What's been the biggest revelation? I'm going to say revelation, that maybe that's not the word, but because I know that it has been a revelation for you, but how would you put that into your own words?
God, that's a tricky question. But as you know, I've done a lot of personal development work on myself over many, many years, and I know that we play all sorts of sneaky games with ourselves and our minds. And I think the key is, it's like, I know it's a two-way street, that our thoughts affect our bodies, and that we can also affect our thoughts by using our bodies. When we we're feeling down and miserable, our bodies go like that. So if we force our bodies to go like that, actually it lifts the mood a bit. And I guess I'd forgotten that. I think having your guidance through that maze, if you like, the mental maze. There's something I read in a book. It's really easy for us to forget our times of knowing. And I think having someone to guide me back to, hang on, do you really want to keep running on this hamster wheel? How long have you said you want to jump off the wheel? And by going back to Iceland, you're just continuing to run on the wheel. I guess I really needed to be reminded of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It is quite sobering that even when we are involved in teaching and educating others and coaching others, which is what you do, you bring a lot of, so in your photography training, it's not just about teaching someone how to use a camera, it's teaching them, how to see the world perhaps differently and through new eyes, new lenses, but also perspective. So I know that with your own personal development journey, you bring a lot of those skills when you are working with your clients. But we can't always be our own coach and our own teacher.
No,
We need someone to be that mirror, really.
absolutely, because, we've still got our own. You haven't got. So I've got the stories in my head about, I've got to look after the clients, and what am I going to do for work, and how am I going to pay the rent, how am I going to do this, that, and the other. They're all spinning around in my head, but they're not spinning around in your head. And so you kind of like holding up the clarity mirror and going, well, look, no. It it makes a huge difference.
And there's a big component to this, which is often not, even when it is talked about, we often don't really take it on board for ourselves. And that is that of all the thoughts that we have, and there's all sorts of figures out there, is it 40,000 a day or 70,000 a day? I don't know. I can't remember. But that actually 5% of our day-to-day life is being organized and understood by our conscious mind. And we have this whole unconscious part of us, which is 95%. And that's the programming, the early beliefs that we picked up from our family, circumstances, all pre-7 years old. And it's something that when we have all of this stuff in our unconscious, we can't find a way into it. If we all knew what was in our unconscious as well as we knew what was in our conscious mind, we know we like apples and not oranges, well, life would be easy, but it's not like that. And so what we are doing with the lifestyle prescriptions health coaching process is helping you to see all of the different aspects of your life. So your social, your beliefs, your emotions, your lifestyle choices, all of those, and how they are, you know, what you're left with. Because when we start to really look at all of those and, if you like, unpack them, the idea is that you can start to see where are the patterns? What are you actually doing? So there's, you know, it's not a case of me telling you or showing you, but just guiding you through that process. And when you come to the conclusions yourself, and often even that is actually a fairly unconscious.
Very unconscious. It's so here's an interesting thing. Yeah, there were times in this period, the last few months, of thinking, okay, I can't do this forever. I've still got to get an income and blah de blah de blah. But what is interesting is once the noise stopped, opportunities presented themselves, unlooked for, which is stuff which that's just miracles and magic. But it's like, yes, our subconscious minds do things. Did the world suddenly change and shift because I needed something? I don't know. All I know is that, was I more aware of something? I don't know. All I know is that someone said to me, hey, you're really desperate for some help with something. And it's something I used to love doing years ago. Can you come and help us out for the summer? It's quite well paid and it'll be good fun. That's unexpected. Another colleague, a friend, has come up out of the blue, met for lunch and just said, hey, I've got an idea. Would you be interested in doing XYZ? And that's using my photography skills and other things. And both are unlooked for. It's not like I've been scouring the paper, panicking because I need a job. And I've trusted a bit. And that's been a part of a revolution as well, to be reminded of that. Because it's a bit frightening, you know, to say, oh, I'm not going to work for a few months. I'm not going to do this.
Just to recap then, where you are right now in terms of your symptoms. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that first of all.
Okay. Sleeping like a baby, able to lie down in bed. This morning I walked about 3.5, 4 miles up across the forest. To begin with, the walking was only on flat level. I was walking up the hills and across the forest and all that. I haven't taken any of the anti-inflammatories now for 10 days. Does it still nip me occasionally? Yes. An interesting thing is, whereas before it was nipping when I moved, now it has a tendency to nip if I sit still for too long.
You know, it's really good to highlight that the patterns change. And, you know, when I was working as a physio and we were taking a purely mechanical perspective, you know, my head would have been going round in circles because I wouldn't have had any clear answers. Whereas now what I'm interested in is what is the biology? So what are the tissues that are involved? So, you know, we really look at what is the biology and we try and put things in there. So you remember there was a time when you couldn't walk forwards, but actually we could get you walking sideways or backwards. Well, if we look at that from a biological, functional point of view, guess what? For this time, you actually need to be either just sidestepping, walking sideways, or taking a back step and giving yourself that opportunity to let all of that mind chatter rest and to arrive at a different place in your thinking and your understanding of what life is holds for you moving forwards. Me, moving away from traditional physiotherapy has been really a big change, and it is one of those things that when you see it, you can't unsee it. And there is nothing, although it's still helpful to take a physical perspective, which of course is what we do with basic ergonomics and then also with the Buttafly technique. But it's what happens after that, or what happens alongside it, where we can support you on the journey that you've been on now, where I think from everything that you've said, you feel in yourself a much better place. But I'd love to hear you just tell us a little bit about how you're feeling about where you are right now, having taken
I'm enjoying it.
bus and everything. I mean, you look like you're enjoying it, but
Yeah, I am. I'm enjoying the adventure, the journey, and giving myself permission to. What's that? There's a poem, something we have no time to stand and stare. I can't remember who it's by, but I've never forgotten that line. I heard it in a movie. Giving myself permission to stand and stare for a minute.
well, it's I'm really delighted because of course I saw you when you were in so much pain, and it is really scary when you've got that amount of pain. And of course, you know, if you can't lie down and you can't stand up and you can't walk, you're really stuck.
Mm.
So thank you for sharing your journey. I hope that you continue to, I have no doubt that you will move forwards on this very adventurous, exciting new place. And I wish you all the best. And thank you for sharing with the people who hopefully it will give them some food for thought about how they may be able to move forwards in their own life.
My pleasure.